Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury.
And welcome to our second to last episode before Christmas. I have battled my way back from, it was either Ebola, man flu or a heavy cold. So forgive me if the voice is sounding just a touch husky today. But before we indulge ourselves next week with our own version of A Christmas Carol, this week we've got our latest ward report, and one which is very pertinent for myself and Simon, as we are both residents of Cosham. So we are blessed and joined by no less than all three of our Cosham ward councillors. Welcome, councillors.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Good evening. So I'll give a bit of introduction to the ward and then to our councillors, and then should we crack straight on with the questions, Ian?
Let's do it.
Okay, so Cosham is one of the three Portsmouth wards not on the island. It's still part of Portsmouth, but you can fight in the comments about that if you want to. With Paulsgrove to the west and Drayton Farlington to the east, it stretches from the top of the hill in the north and to Portsbridge Creek in the south. It's an area with thousands of residential houses, mostly pre-World War II to the east of the High Street, and post the Second World War to the west with the Isle of Wight and Wymering estates. It's home to Highbury College, Cosham High Street, QA Hospital, the council-owned Lakeside Office Park, and King George Vth playing fields, and enjoys easy connections by car, train, or bus into the city and out to the neighbouring towns and beyond. So there's our advert for Cosham. We're joined today by all three of the Cosham ward councillors, so we're really lucky, and thank you all three for giving us your Sunday evening. So we're joined by Cllr Matthew Atkins, Councillor Asghar Shah and Councillor Mary Vallely. So welcome very much to the show. Bit of a quick history. Councillor Atkins joined Portsmouth City Council in 2019 as one of the three Conservative councillors for the ward at the time. He's the opposition spokesperson for planning policy and city development. Councillor Shah joined the council in 2022 as the first Labour councillor in Cosham since 2002, and is the opposition spokesperson for environmental services and for resources. And Councillor Vallely joined the council in May this year, bringing the Labour councillors in Cosham to two. Mary is the opposition spokesperson for culture, leisure and economic development. There we go. Hopefully I've got all of that right.
Indeed.
Marvellous. So if we can start with our questions, and I guess, if there is such a thing, what does a typical day as a Cosham councillor look like? And can I ask that first to Matthew, please?
Sure, yeah. I think there are some misconceptions about councillors which I can clear up quickly, though probably most of your listeners are aware. So we're not full-time, so I have a day job. Certainly I know Councillor Shah does. I don't know what Councillor Mary Vallely, but I suspect she does as well. So I worked out at the university. But days where I'm doing a lot of council work, I tend to come home in the evening, every evening, and check my email. So that's kind of regular casework via email, correspond with residents, correspond with officers. When there is ward casework to be done in person, we have meetings arranged during the week potentially, or the weekend with residents, attending local community events. Sadly, of course, the Christmas light switch on was cancelled this week, but we're all geared up, I expect, to attend that on Thursday night before it was suddenly cancelled. And then, so there's that side of it. Then half the job is dealing with kind of residents, ward casework in email, casework in person, attending sort of local events, meeting local community groups. Then the other half is central council stuff, so meetings that we attend in council. Probably have one or two of those a week, maximum, depending on our meeting load, where we go in and say shadow our portfolio. Mine is about planning policy, like the local plan, city development, like big major projects going on in the city, not particularly Cosham specific, but obviously affects Cosham heavily. Might be on the planning committee, might be on one of the other committees in council. And then, so there's sort of two halves of the job. One's casework, one's set up in the council. So it's a misconception we might be sort of fat cat government people as well. We're all three of us in opposition, and it's a mostly voluntary role. We get about a £10,000 allowance topped up by small banks, depending on what we do. So we do our council work in council. We do casework as we can for the ward, and we best advocate for the ward as we can. But our primary job is actually representing those individual residents when they have issues with their council services. So, dealing with those emails, going and seeing residents, and going to community events is probably the main function of a local councillor, I would say.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. And Shah, how does your day look? Are you juggling a job and council work as well?
Thank you, Ian. Actually, my day is there is not much difference, but first of all, obviously, I am a spokesperson in two portfolio. One is environmental services and resources. I'm also a member of the planning committee and licensing committee as well. I'm standing deputy for employment committee as well. So I got, I think, more roles. So I'm obviously busy in the council. Almost every week I do have at least a meeting, a committee meeting. And I'm also out from morning till evening. Fridays, my day to go out and to see my residents, meet them. I have four monthly local surgeries. So every Friday from 11 till 12, I have surgery in different locations. And after these surgeries, I do go out and meet my residents face to face in person. Over the phone, yes, but face to face, I do more. I like to go in to see my residents. This is on a weekly basis, on regular basis. I have my full-time job and I have my young family. I do food hub as well for the last good few years, and I do organize Christmas hampers, which is again for the last good few years. Christmas meal, another project I added to my portfolio, my residence portfolio, call it not council portfolio, as a community volunteer. And New Year meal is another one for this year. So there is so much actually I've been doing for the last good few years now, and I do enjoy it.
Oh, it sounds like a lot of work, Shah. I think you'd have to enjoy it. So Mary, as the newbie to the team, how are you finding balancing the demands of work and council life? Well, is there anything in there that surprised you, or did you get the inside track before you signed up?
Well, a bit of both, but don't tell you the full story in case you don't go for it. Do you know what I mean? So my portfolio is culture, leisure, and economic development, of which there's a lot involved. And then planning-wise, I'm in planning, or committee-wise, I'm in planning. I'm in education and young people scrutiny panel. I'm in the management scrutiny panel. Standing deputy for governance, audit and standards. Say that quickly. Langston Harbour, I'm on the board for that. And I'm also on the Push Partnership for South Hants. And of course, we're all involved in the local plan. Yes, quite busy, and 2 part-time jobs. Yeah. So there's never a typical day, but I have several meetings in a week, without doubt.
Marvelous, thank you all.
Okay, so we're just so our viewers can understand, we've randomised who we're coming to first for each question, just to give everyone a chance to come first. Staying with Mary, what are the issues residents are raising the most with you?
Well, I forgot to mention that, of course, in amongst all that committee work, and the priority is actually the casework. Working with the residents is our main priority, and I try to do every Friday with Shah. It's difficult because my portfolio often meets on a Friday mornings, but we usually get the afternoon and the early evening to do this. So meeting with residents is really important. The things that they mostly talk about are traffic issues, parking permits, things like needing double yellow lines removed or added, needing a traffic island because the traffic's really bad, especially in Wymering. The other things that are really important to people are housing issues. And I suppose the other thing that we look at are sometimes issues with antisocial behaviour, drugs in the area.
Yeah.
So those are the main things. And obviously the cost of living is everybody's issue at the minute. People are really struggling. And that's both sides of Cosham.
But it was interesting you mentioned that. Would you say there are two Coshams effectively? Is there that kind of divide that exists, or?
The obvious difference is that there's more council housing in one side than the other, and I think that we're really lucky to have council housing, because actually lots of councils have sadly sold off their council housing, so we are lucky to have that. The benefit of having a council house is that when things are really difficult financially, the council will help you. If there's a hole in the roof, you'll get it fixed. If you own your house and it's wear and tear, at the minute, people are struggling to get things fixed. You know, they're putting up with the damp, doing jobs themselves that necessarily aren't the best way of doing things. But yeah, there's a struggle financially for everybody.
Thank you, Shah. Anything more to add on that? What are people saying to you?
Yeah, I think what my colleague said is mainly we got traffic issues like double yellow line, traffic island. There are few spots, actually very hot spots in Cosham. So we are working on them to have island there. Residence permit parking is another one which some residents they didn't like, but I think they are coming towards inclined to have residence permit parking, and it's again another hot topic at the moment in our ward. We are working on that, and since I got elected last year, I've been working on traffic calming measures for like daily basis. Do see my residents, and the traffic issues are the main one, and obviously housing we can say is the second one. Housing you will find everywhere, but I think traffic calming measure is very burning issue. Yeah.
Okay, that's lovely. And last but not least, Matthew, what are people coming to you about?
Sure. I think antisocial behaviour is worth emphasising. I think that. So I don't fully agree that there's two Coshams. I don't think Mary said particularly that there is definitely two Coshams.
No,
but I think that there are issues that are universal to the ward, and then there's specific area issues. And antisocial behaviour is universal to the whole area of the ward. All the areas, both sides of the high street, Wymering, the Highbury estate, they're all concerned about antisocial behaviour and house burglary, and that's why we've been organising police meetings where we can. We've been trying to. And the Police and Crime Commission is opening a new police desk, and there's the work going on to build the new police station in Cosham. So I think there is some good work being done there. I think that is a key issue across the ward. Traffic, the issues are different in different areas. So the speeding is particularly a Medina Road issue near the primary school, and a Highbury estate issue, I think. Former Councillor Mason and I tried to get the vehicle activated signs set up. Those are still in the works. Those are approved. It's taking an annoying length of time to get them, and I know my two colleagues weren't necessarily sure about that idea and asked for further investigation, but it's taken quite a bit of time to get them installed. But those are in the works as well, and so I think those are two sort of big issues going on at the moment. And the traffic zone area, the parking zone, I get most complaints about parking from the hospital area, where they have a parking zone, and that has always been the case. And it's very unfortunate patients, doctors, nurses leaving their cars, and because enforcement is such a difficult issue. We get a lot of casework where I'm passing on the number of the traffic enforcement team and saying, when there's a car outside in your parking zone without a parking permit, the best thing to do is call enforcement and hope they have someone free to come and investigate. So I think obviously those are two major issues. I think there's still concerns coming in quite regularly around the KG5 development, the FIFA Excellence Centre, and the effect that that has had on the playing fields in terms of their tidiness, in terms of whether when it's going to finish and when the site is going to be rectified and made attractive as it should be. And over the last year, there's still a residual, and I know we've got a question coming on it later, concern around development in the centre of town. And I think that's well, I'll discuss that more later, more on hold now than it was, and certainly I've worked very hard alongside former colleagues and current colleagues to get the number of flats down there, and there are no imminent plans for development there, but we'll discuss that later, I imagine.
Okay.
So I think those are the three most common issues that we do hear about: the centre development, the traffic, and the antisocial behaviour.
Lovely. Thank you. Ian?
So if we look at the political element, so the current council has the makeup with 18 Liberal Democrats, 8 Conservatives, 7 for Labour, 6 for PIP, and some other folk. Can't do the numbers in my brain that quickly. So I guess in terms of trying to hold a minority administration to account and to ensure that the voices of your residents are heard, how do you make that work? With both of you, both sides being in minority parties. And can I ask that first to Shah, please?
I think I may be a little bit different. Whenever we need to challenge the administration, we do. And I think a recent example is for the stroke recovery services. We did challenge the administration and we got the services back. But mostly we, and especially myself, when I'm talking about myself as a community volunteer, I do want to work with all the parties. And obviously my colleague, Matt, he does know me very well. And I do want to work with each and everyone for the best of my community, for the best of my residents. So whenever challenge is required, yes, I do challenge. And when needs to be work friendly for the best, to get the best for my residents, and yes, we do work together. I do try to work with all parties, and this is obvious, I think, from my dealing with all other groups.
Perfect. Thank you. And can I ask the same question to Mary? How are you getting the voices of your residents amplified?
We have our feet in the ground all the time, so we can prove a need with surveys or whatever we have. So we actually have people's voices as fact, knocking on doors regularly, going out, talking to people in groups, surveying what people need, think, want. So yeah, we obviously we can bring motions and things like that, but actually the stuff on the ground is the most important thing, feeding that back.
Yep.
Challenging, questioning. Yeah.
And so I guess finally, last but by no means least, Matt, how do you how are you finding life now in opposition rather than there was a few years when the Conservatives led the council? Is it hard?
Yeah, so sadly I wasn't part of the group when Conservatives led the council. We lost administration in 2018 and I was elected in 2019. But so my experience has been a bit of opposition. I think Councillor Shaw is right that the first approach to working with working administration is always that you would try, and I'm vocal in council and I'm criticised publicly when I think there is a problem, but that's not what I do first. What I do first is I go and talk to the cabinet member. I have usually given fair warning behind the scenes and had the long discussions with cabinet members. When it came to the fireworks issue, for example, which didn't work out very well for the north of the city this year, as Councillor Mason and I had kind of predicted. We had long discussions with officers, long discussions with cabinet members, trying to get them to prepare properly for that, to put in place the right measures, warning them this was going to be an issue that resulted out of the development. And the reason for the public criticism I've given of the administration in public is because warnings and advice were not heeded in private. So, but a lot of the time, a lot of that work goes on more privately in private discussions, and there isn't a need to have a kind of public holding to account or opposition. And when we talk about the development of possible flats in the city centre, I would use that as an example of where, in the end, the administration and the officers worked with us. I would highlight the role of a councillor, particularly as you've spent a bit more time on the council, in dealing with officers as well, because so much of our casework, it's not worth taking to an elected cabinet member. You actually take it to a relevant officer, be that a director or a caseworker. So if we get a housing query, someone feels their housing accommodation is inadequate or they've got an antisocial behaviour issue around their housing, I'm not going to take that straight to Darren Sanders, the cabinet member. I'm going to go via the officers. I'm going to get their case reviewed. I'm going to advocate for them where they might have issues that mean their accommodation is not suitable because of a child, a disability their child has or something like that. It's much more common that I'm working with officers. Or when we planned the exercise equipment in Cosham Park, that was me, Councillor Mason, and the officers in parks working on that, and the officer for our SIL money working on that. And really that's about reminding the officers Cosham's here, and if you want a project accomplished, you have to stay on top of it week to week, keep those emails going in, asking for status updates. And that's not because the officers don't want to help. The officers are really useful, and they've worked very hard on a lot of projects for Cosham over the years, but it's their caseload is so heavy, the workload that they're doing, you have to keep Cosham at the top of the agenda, if you see what I mean. So that building relationship with officers, knowing who does what, and encouraging them to keep on top of the projects that are slowly making their way through for Cosham infrastructure. That's I think a big part of how we make sure that our ward is well serviced. Yes, there is the public debate, and that tends to be on the higher level issues. The spending across the city, the council tax, the big developments planned. If you want to get a smaller thing done, it's probably better to work through the officers as best you can first. See what I mean? Yeah.
No. It sounds like some of those some of the council meetings, which can sometimes get a little bit playful. There's much more collaboration goes on behind the scenes than perhaps most people see. Would that be fair?
I think that is fair. I think there's often been extensive discussion behind the scenes of a lot of these issues, and it's where we have a different opinion we haven't resolved that it comes out in the meetings in public.
And that beautifully segues into our next question, which is how does Cosham and the rest of the north of the city compare to other wards for things like infrastructure investment? And if I can ask that first to Mary, please.
It would seem, when you first look at it, that actually the south gets everything. That's the common perception. But actually, Copner has more industrial units than anywhere else in the city. We have QA. We have things that you wouldn't necessarily think about. But obviously, in the south, there's much more around culture, which is difficult because they have both the theatres, they have the art spaces, they have things, more cafe culture, the whole shopping areas are bigger. And I think that's something that we can work on for Cosham, maybe improving the shopping offer, making sure that we fill those spaces in the high street, maybe working on some of the planters, making it look a bit better. But actually, I don't think we do too badly.
Okay, thank you, and I'll go to Matthew next, if that's all right. So, how do we compare to the south? Is the north getting a raw deal or not?
I think what the south gets that the north doesn't get is that kind of ongoing regular attention. Those, I mean, there's an attempt to organise events in the north of the city, but the events in the south of the city this year have worked out, and the events in the north of the city, particularly in Cosham, have not gone the way that we would have hoped or expected. And I think that kind of there's regular cultural stuff. There's that kind of beautification of the south that goes on. I think that's why you can end up feeling like the north gets a bit of a raw deal. Sometimes our road surfaces seem to be quite neglected in the north. Some of the road surfaces I think that are allowed to go on in Wymering, in Paulsgrove as well, the Isle of Wight estate, and at times even in the Highbury estate. I think if those road surfaces were seen in Southsea, I think there would be quite a lot of consternation. So I think that there's kind of regular council service questions, I would say. Overall investment, I think there's two aspects to it. One, Cosham received quite a lot of attention in, I guess, the purchase of Lakeside. If we call that a council investment, that's a big investment. And also in relation to this new FIFA Fair Play Centre. And now I know that's not actually necessarily great for the residents of Cosham, but if you talk to, Steve Pitt, if he was here, to be fair to him, well, he would say that was a big investment in Cosham that the council has made alongside, Football England. What I would say is that there's other investment that's come in the north of the city, whereas the south recently has been quite unsuccessful in its funding bids for government for various things. I don't think the Portsmouth South made any successful funding applications to government at all last year, whereas through Penny Mordaunt we've seen investment come into the Hillsea Lido. Obviously the closure of Cosham Health Centre was very controversial, but in the wake of that, Penny Mordaunt went up and spoke to the health minister and made sure that the funding for a new GP surgery at the old PCMI site, so north of the town centre, was green lit. So the funding has been green lit for that. Funding is, currently building a new A&E at Queen Alexandra Hospital. So I actually think there's been a reasonable amount of government funding come to the north of the city in the last couple of years. We just haven't actually seen it hit yet. And as I already mentioned, the new Blue Light Centre, the fire station, the police station that the Police and Crime Commissioner Donna Jones is working on. So I think if we look overall, there is some good investment coming, but it's in the pipeline. And some of the short-term things have been quite bad, like obviously the closure of the health centre and the problems that the associated GP closure, though the other two GP surgeries, the Cosham Park House and the Drayton surgery, have really stepped up. I think in the wake of that, I know their service is not perfect, but they have absorbed the patients well, and that process in the end was resolved, I think, without too many people having major problems. While I think there's been some issues with the council services sometimes forgetting Cosham, the overall picture over the last few years, particularly when you take into account other sources of funding, hasn't been too bad for Cosham.
Okay. Thank you. Shah, did you have anything to add on that one? What were your thoughts?
I think I agree with both of my colleagues, but I think a couple of things which I want to mention and add, actually, just to and what they said, I agree with them. I don't want to go in more details, but a few things which in the south of the city, I think they got leadership. The MP is spending more time in the city, and I think he got more activities with the residents in the south of the city. Also, I think cycle lanes in the north of the city, I think south is better than the north of the city. Yes, we do have better facilities like QA we got in Cosham is in the north of the city. We got KGB in the north of the city. But a couple of things which I just mentioned about bikes, and I think we need more activities in the north of the city. But obviously, I know Penny got so much to do as well, but we need someone to lead the north of the city so we can get better, like in the south. They are, I would say, a bit better, not that much, but a bit better, because they got the leadership.
Okay, thank you.
Now let's focus on the north-south divide and something which is I think has caused some consternation. So obviously the fireworks at King George V had to be moved. We were told there would be one in the south and one in the north. North was said definitely going ahead, then was cancelled. And then this week the Christmas light switch on at Cosham. I think Matthew alluded to it earlier. It looked like it was going ahead, and then the message came as somebody who took the bins down in my shorts and t-shirt. I couldn't quite see it. So, how can we, is there something to this, or, how can we avoid the perception that the events, that the nice events rather than the financial event in the north tend to be cancelled at the last minute? What can be done to make that better? And can I ask that first to Mary, please?
This is a really difficult one, and everybody was so disappointed, especially at Halloween, I think. So indoors in the council, we have experts. If we don't listen to them, what is the point of them? I was actually in the council on the third floor when Steve Pitt made the decision, and because they weren't sure, because things can change with the weather so easily, they left it to the last so that hopefully children wouldn't be disappointed. But of course that didn't happen. The difficulty we have is that if people get injured, they go straight to the solicitor these days. It's not a straightforward, like in the old days, everybody get wet and they go home and they change, and people have an opinion about whether we should have gone ahead or not. So it's difficult. I don't have an answer. Okay. I suppose communication is the answer at the end of the day, making sure that everybody's on board. You're never going to get agreement from everybody, and that's the problem. Yeah, that's a hard one.
No worries. So, Shah, your thoughts?
Actually, I do agree with my colleague, but I want to add a couple of things in regards to the event was cancelled in very short time. I think health and safety obviously is the top priority for our residents, for ourselves, for our council, and that's what they decided. But I think before that, if we go a bit further, when this event was even announced, that was very late announced in the north of the city. We didn't have proper information what's going on where the event will be organized in the KGV, because we used to have in KGV or somewhere else. So I did submit actually a couple of questions to in the full council meeting, and I did ask a question about, I think the communication was a bit poor, could be improved, and the cabinet member did agree with me, and he said, yes, you're right, and we will improve communication in the future, because we are representing the community, our wards. So if we are not on board, we are not on the same page, obviously we can't answer to our residents. So that was agreed, and hopefully, I do hope that will be improved in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you, Shah. Matthew, finally to yourself. Are the residents of the north getting a raw deal, or is it just force majeure and unavoidable?
I think I would say that there is some raw deal here. I don't think it's all just force majeure and unavoidable, because I think it's down to planning, and it's down to decisions that should have been taken a lot earlier, and things that should have been thought out, and plans that should have been made substantial amounts of time before. I'm talking more about the fireworks here. I'll get to the rather sad events of this week on Thursday and the Christmas light switch on afterwards. But to talk about the fireworks, this was a slow-moving car crash that, Councillor Mason and I anticipated. I mean, Councillor Hockenheim goes that far back. It goes back years to when the plans were in motion to build this FIFA Fair Play Centre. We immediately said, well, what's going to happen to the regular events on King George V, because there really isn't another suitable site in Portsmouth North, and that's down to Portsmouth South having a longer history of having events and that kind of question we went back to before about the focus of public events on the South. There's quite a lot of locations where you can hold that sort of thing in Portsmouth South. There's the High Street has its big food festival. There's various, the Kite Festival, the Victoria's Festival go on the Common, Castlefield, the new development around the bandstand of the sea defences. All of that took into account holding events. But if you look at the planning of new things in Portsmouth North, it doesn't take into account how we're going to hold public events and public access so well. There's been too much sort of last-minute quick design thinking recently, and I'm very worried the same thing is going on in the Bransbury Park Sports Centre, but that is obviously not directly my ward issue. How are people going to get there? How are they going to park? How are they going to be safe? And how are we going to be able to accommodate the numbers? And that's the kind of things we wanted them thinking about if they were going to take away the ability to hold something like the fireworks at KG5, because there's been some dispute over, having to cross slightly major roads to get to KG5, but ultimately you can park in Lakeside and there's an underpass. You can park in the centre of town, and the police 1 year briefly closed the London road so people could cross safely from Cosham Park over, where the train station, where the bus station is, into KG5. It's a good site. If they'd consulted years earlier on this FIFA thing, if they thought about it a bit more, I do think there's an argument maybe it should have gone to Farlington playing fields, and not that we just because a lot of football is also held there, and Cosham KG5 had this dual community role. It was very clear a long way in advance, I think, that the Hillsea site they'd chosen, Alexandra Park, was going to be difficult because Councillor Paisley Harris said it as soon as he heard it, it floods far too easily. It turns into a bog. Doesn't fully flood, but it's just far too muddy and too exposed a lot of the time to hold that kind of size of event. And its transport links weren't good enough. And in terms of something similar on Farlington, you've got the same problem getting cars in and out and it being a little bit out of the way. So I just think that there aren't the locations put aside and thought about and set up for these kind of events in the North. And when it comes to new developments in the North, it's not given the same kind of priority it would be given if you were thinking about, the South. I think the recent cancellation on the High Street will either turn out, and this requires further investigation. Residents have been asking me to ask why, for a November event, was it not planned out that they had a stage surface that was suitable for the weather, or a covering of the stage surface that protected them so that it wasn't too slippery. There are questions to be asked in planning there, how this event was planned as well. And I know back in the day, Councillor Mason, this is going back longer ago, sort of 15 years, had to fight quite hard to keep the Cosham Christmas light switch on event at all. I think the administration is supportive in principle, but it's no good if it's kind of an afterthought that doesn't get sufficient planning consideration. It might just turn out to be an individual mistake this year that someone didn't protect the stage against water that should have done, or forgot to bring the right sort of surface or something. I don't know. But I think it's very disappointing. Given the likely weather conditions and the fact, as you say, the weather that night just wasn't that bad. I think I've been out in similarly bad weather before for the light switch on. So it's disappointing that decision had to be made, and you feel like some precautions could probably have been taken that would have protected that event. But I don't think that's necessarily a deeper issue. I think the fireworks issue shows a sort of wider problem with events in the North, whereas I think that's an individual disappointing result when it comes to the Christmas light switch on.
In Cosham this year. So thank you all for your answers there.
Okay, so staying with Matthew, and I know we touched on it earlier on. So the new fire station heralds the first piece in a puzzle that seeks to redevelop a large area of land to the immediate west of the High Street. What are the pros and cons of such a development, and what do you hope that's eventually going to entail?
Well, it's worth first saying that so everyone who understands a change that occurred earlier this year in discussions we were having around the local plan is that Cosham had been identified as what's called an opportunity area, and they were attempting what's called a land assembly, i.e. to take together a series of sites, the old police station, the community centre and the health centre site being the main sites, and the council was going to try and buy all those sites to do one big development. That is now not going to go ahead. Councillor Mason and I, Councillor Shaw was there in the meeting, I remember, in the end opposed that because we felt that the thrust behind that part of the scheme was really flats and housing that may well not have sufficient parking provision and were going to be too high intensity for the area. And we think a lot of people were very concerned about that. There is still an identified allocation of housing to Cosham in the local plan for that area, but that has come down, hundreds from where we started. And by opposing the land assembly element, they would come forward as individual developments that the planning committee can scrutinise for each of the individual sites. And I actually suspect Cosham Community Centre may well not be on the cards for development, redevelopment, and now into flats, and I think that's a good thing. The old police station and the health centre would have to be individually looked at, and I think that's a good thing. The blue light centre, in order to make sure that the delays that might occur with this scheme of trying to assemble all the land and buy the land from Health England and the police, the Police and Crime Commissioner, Donna Jones, made sure that she pushed to have the Blue Light Centre, the new fire and police centre, pursued separately and immediately. So that's why that's already gone ahead. And because she made sure those agreements were signed off and the money drawn down from the government and from the council. So the Lib Dem administration, to be fair, worked well with her there to pursue that site. And I think that's good news. There was some controversy about the location and whether or not it's going to be suitable to have the vehicles coming out onto the spur road roundabout. But the council are aware of that, so is the Police and Crime Commissioner. So I think precautions will be taken to make sure the road layout is safe. And I think it's really good news for Cosham that we will have, a fire and police station available there on site. I also think that it's good news that we're not looking at one big development of flats. It's a shame that there isn't more investment in the high street, and footfall is good for the high street. So I do think there's some scope for an increase in housing in the area. The council does not own or control the other very large building, the old XBT building in that area. So that may at some point come forward for private development, but there isn't any imminent plan I'm aware of for that either. I think that with the health centre building itself, it's a shame, but it's not salvageable. It is no longer fit for purpose, and it has asbestos issues and structural issues. So it will come down. It will be down to Health England, Public Health England, whether or not they just decide to try and put new health facilities on that site. That is what I would like to see. It is what Penny Moore would like to see. But given there is this new development of a GP centre up next to the PCMI site, it's possible that may go for a housing development. And if it does, then I'll be pushing for something that has good parking, that is good quality housing, and isn't a kind of slapping as many flats as you can to meet the housing targets kind of approach, which is what I'm afraid I think the previous plan was, and why Councillor Mason and I opposed it. So that's the current status. There is no, the grand plan to buy up a whole lot of sites and build a whole lot of flats is not going ahead on our current understanding.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that very thorough update on that one. I'm sure people really wanted to hear what was going on with regards to that. Mary, can I just come to you? Have you got anything more to add to that one?
I don't think there's anything more to add. The only thing that I know that the local plan looked at many sites for this. So the roundabout is an issue, but I feel like when all is said and done, that's what's had to go ahead. So yeah, nothing else to say.
Shah, anything from you on that?
Actually, I think my colleague, he explained very well, and I agree with him, and we were in the same meeting, and we opposed together, all three councillors at that time. Just I wanted to say, actually, just a short question. The short answer is any development in our ward is we love to have it, and the cone is we don't have the funds to have that big development. At the moment, it is on hold.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Ian.
So, yeah, next question is looking at a time in council, and slightly unfair to yourself, Mary, as you've only been there a short period of time. Is there one achievement so far which you feel most proud of? And if I can come to you first, Mary, that would be great.
There isn't anything that we do that's by ourselves. I think the first thing I did was just phone up and say, what on earth's happened with Chatsworth Road? The potholes were incredible. But I mean, you know, that was already in the system. It just so happened that it started to improve just after. But, you know, things that help people in their houses and their homes. But yeah, generally, nothing that I do by myself.
No, and I think it's very gracious of you, Mary. Can I just say that on behalf of the podcast, we both listened to your maiden speech in council and felt it was fantastic and very moving. So, so that one you definitely did all on your own. So, Matt, you've had a bit longer there. Something you're most proud of?
Sure, yeah, and I mean, we all the pothole issue was an important one. We all chased on. The chasing makes things happen better, quicker, so I think that is an achievement as well. I think the biggest achievement for me in the ward is probably, and it didn't affect the whole ward. It affected a specific community. The campaign last year it affected a specific community in Eastleigh as well, actually. To have the decision reversed to charge residents of the park home estates 10% of the value of their homes if they tried to sell them. I think that was a decision that councils have tried. This council has tried to take before, and other councils have taken the decision, but I think it's a morally wrong decision. And so, you know, this is one of the things where we did have those backroom discussions and we couldn't reach agreement with the cabinet member on this. We took it to him quietly first and said, and I went to the portfolio decision meeting and advocated for a change in that policy there before we, you know, turned up at full council with the big group of the residents, held that banner up and said, you know, this is wrong. So we helped the residents organise a campaign in the Guildhall Square, and we got that decision overturned so that they can now sell their homes without fear of losing, you know, 10% of what is their main asset. I mean, we tried first of all putting in a budget amendment. We were the only party that voted for our budget amendment. I appreciate that we possibly could have made it clearer to Labour that was a key element of our budget amendment, but I think that is one that that we, you know, Councillor Mason, Councillor Harkaday, we really took the lead on that, and we really achieved something in the face of an administration that wanted to bring in that increased charge. So I'm proud that we changed their minds on that one.
Marvellous, thank you, Matthew. And Shah, something in your time you're proud of?
Actually, you asked me one thing. I don't know how many things I can share with you. So we can start it from number one. When I got elected, before that, my plan was to make myself accessible to my residents, and that's I made it in the last over a year now. I'm available 24/7 to my residents, so that was number one. Number two, in the council, our group, but obviously I presented motion for NHS dentistry, and that was approved unanimously by the full council meeting, and we got 2 dentistry, one in Cosham and the other one on Copner Road. And the third one is waste services in house. That was also approved, and by next year, April, we will be having these waste services back in house.
Oh.
So yes, I can go a bit further, but I think I can stop it here. You asked for one, so I have.
As it's Christmas, Shah, I think I can let you have 3, but I'm not sure I'm going to be prepared to go further than that. So no, thank you ever so much to all 3 of you. Simon.
Okay, thanks, Ian. So just before I ask the last question, which is the the if money and politics were no object, what would you see changed? I just wanted to catch up on a couple of the comments which I thought were good. So Claire in the comments on LinkedIn is saying that communication is key. So we're agreeing with the points I think that you were all making with regards to the communications about social events being cancelled. She's also mentioned in another couple of comments that Wetherspoons and the bingo hall are thriving. So excellent. Glad to see that the Wetherspoons and the bingo scene is alive and well in Cosham High Street. I remember the bingo scene being absolutely packed when I used to work at Tesco in Cosham on the High Street, and they used to turf out every time to come and get their snacks in the interval. And she also mentions that Cosham needs more places to socialise, young and old together. And that's an interesting point, obviously, about the mix, the generations there. So thank you, Claire, for those comments. So our last question, as I say, was if politics and financial restrictions weren't a barrier, so money or politics or votes were no object, what one thing would you change about how the council works? And if I can go first to Matthew for that one, please.
So one of the things that I've looked at during my time on the council is trying to make some significant, it ties in a bit to the comments you said, significant improvement to Cosham High Street. I'd like to see some kind of increased beautification, some smartening up, to some subsidy to encourage better businesses in. And you know, Council Mason and I even, you know, we did get some things done. We got improved electrical points, we got new street lighting put in, we've had some work done on pavement and resurfacing, but we put together a plan to try and use SIL money to improve the high street a bit, and it was coming to kind of 400,000 pounds. Doing things through the council costs a shocking amounts of money. You start to realise, and one thing would be nice to change is how much it costs to do basic things through the council. But my real point was going to be that it would be nice if the council, I mean, it's expected to save it, and it isn't able to make the kind of savings, and certainly the northern high streets are not a priority for the kind of spending we're talking about the current administration, but it's expected to somehow save and acquire the money to make infrastructure improvements across the city from the council budget. And local authorities, I mean, Portsmouth, I think, and I give a lot of credit to the previous Conservative administration for this, as well as some credit to the current administration, in a relatively good financial position, in the sense we're not looking at going bankrupt anytime soon like a lot of councils are. But councils are not in the position to be able to save up the kind of money they need to actually undergo regeneration and redevelopment of important assets to the city, like local town centres. And so it would be nice if we would just give, you know, if councils had a funding pot from which they could do that without expecting to having to find it, while also trying to find, and frankly, this is the biggest drain on every council budget, adult social care money, adult and children's social care too, but particularly adult social care is that area that, you know, paying for care for the elderly and care for the vulnerable, which isn't a really important thing that councils do, but it shouldn't be on councils, and it's too much money. It means we don't have the money to regenerate the city, and you know, resolving that problem is going to be an important problem nationally, and I think will free up councils to be able to do a lot more to actually invest in key areas of the city, and so that, I think, is what I would say.
Okay, thank you very much. And just for the benefit of our listeners, before I go to Shah, on that one, SIL is community infrastructure levy. That's a levy.
Yeah, sorry. Every time there's development in Cosham area, we get a small percentage of that to invest in. It has to be infrastructure projects, so it can't be ongoing. People often say, why can't you start a youth club with it? We're not allowed to do anything which has ongoing regular upkeep costs. It can only be big one-off projects, one-off payments. Like, for example, something else I'm proud of is the exercise equipment in Cosham Park. That's the type of thing we can spend SIL money on. We have quite a lot in Cosham at the moment because of developments at North Harbour, where the big Tesco's is. God brought us a lot of money in, but that money will disappear quickly if we spend it too readily. And we were looking, therefore, at, can we do something big with the big windfall we got, but we could never quite hit on a full scheme for the high street that would make the difference we wanted within the budget we had. So it's quite limited amounts of money you get year on year, but currently we've got a couple of 100,000 there-ish saved up in Cosham to spend on something good.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, and for explaining that for our listeners. Thank you, Matthew. Shah, if politics and money were no objects, what would you like to change about how the council works?
Actually, before that, I want to just add one point, Cllr Martin point, which is focus on building a community who can help you. What I would like to say is, number one is those areas. We got 5 polling stations in our ward, and I want to have in each and every polling station at least one community center where that community center is open for any age group. So like Wymering, we used to have, there is no community center at the moment, and I'm trying to get a space for them to socialize for either with senior citizens or families who can socialize. So coming on the point, what you said, actually, the honest answer is, since I got elected, I tried my best, and I will try my best to change the culture. We need to put our residents on the top of the list and put our parties behind. And if we can do that, that will be a very, very big change, because when we work like friends, it doesn't matter you're conservative, you're conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, PIP, whatever, it doesn't matter. It does matter you are working for your residents. If you are working for your residents, you will be working together. And when you work together, the outcome will be positive for our residents, and which needs to be our top priority. In the council, again, blaming each other rather than having, what did you do? You show your residents, rather than blaming others, you didn't do it. So that is the culture change. I'm trying for this, and that's why I have good relation, and I'm trying to have good relation with all parties, so we can work for the residents rather than for the party.
Lovely. Thank you, Shah. Mary, last word on that?
Can I have two?
Go on.
I would really like to go back to the committee structure rather than the cabinet structure, because everybody in the council would have more access to say what they need for the residents. Some people are very good at sharing information. There are definitely people in the party, the Lib Dems in control, who will share, but there are people who don't, and it's not fair, really. The other thing I'd love is for us to have childcare, so that parents, and especially women, can get more involved in being a councillor. And, also maybe putting time restrictions on meetings that go on till 12 midnight. It's ridiculous when you have childcare commitments. You can't do that. That's what I'd like.
Okay, lovely.
Perfect. So
thank you very much.
Thank you all for giving up your Sunday evenings to share that with the listeners. And, I think Simon and I have been doing this long enough to know that being a councillor, there's the fame and there's the money, but that's not really why anybody gets into it.
There are
no
amused faces on the other end of the web.
And there's only infamy in terms of fame.
Oh,
There's definitely
yeah,
not fame.
absolutely. It's all, again, so on behalf of the podcast, we'd like to thank all three of you for your service to the people of Cosham and Wymering, and wish you all a very splendid Christmas break when the time comes. So you've been listening to the Pompey Politics podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And our guests this evening have been Councillor Matthew Atkins, Councillor Asghar Shah, and Councillor Mary Vallely. Thank you all three.
Thank you.
You're all welcome. Thank you so much for giving up part of your Sunday evening, and thank you for the lovely comments. And just to remind everyone, join us next week at 6:27 when we have our last episode of the year, where we're doing a bit of a Christmas carol. So we'll be looking over votes of Christmas past, present, and future. So we'll be casting our eye into the future of what's going to happen in 2024. So do join us next week at 6:27. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, send biscuits, whatever whatever you'd like to do to support the podcast, thank you very much. And we'll see you next week.